falling in love with him over and over and over again. I keep falling in love with him over and over and over again.
But I'm thrilled to be here. I'm energized this morning. I think you know why, don't you? My lovely bride is now here, and got her from the airport last night about midnight, got back here a little after 1, and I'm just thrilled that she's able to be here, and I'm looking forward to her hearing some of the things we heard last night, aren't you? Yes, you have no idea what's coming. Well, we're all going to have a good time watching you listen to it. At least some of us will. But we are delighted for so many things today, and I'm just rejoicing in the Lord for this. I must confess, last night I was not prepared for the size of the group that was going to be present. Last time that Tish and I were able to be at this event was back years ago when we were speaking, and I remember, I think it was at the Sevierville building then. And so when I came in last night, I was expecting a larger crowd than that, but wow, this is fantastic. It's wonderful to see that a congregation in Jacksonville, Alabama has the vision to reach so many people in so many different ways, media, whether it be house to house, heart to heart, or polishing the pulpit, or this event. God be thanked for their vision. It makes such a difference. And you know, sometimes people say, well, you ought to go to a mega church and learn how they do things. And mega church is usually defined by being some large number of people. Well, they have a good number of folks there at Jacksonville, and I think in the neighborhood of 200 more, but they do a lot with less than some folks ever dream of, and they're hard workers, and I love and appreciate them so very much for this. Matrimonial minefields. Who is planting these mines? Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, and you remember in the garden that Satan appeared, and I can promise you this, whenever there's any kind of accusation being hurled in a marriage at one's mate, or any denigrating statement being made in a marriage about one's mate, Satan's lurking nearby. And I don't know why I'd never given proper notice to this before in my own Bible study. That's the thing I love about the Bible. You can study it for years and years and years and still have something hit you in the face that it's been there all along, you just didn't pay proper attention to it or enough attention to it in the past. I think it was T.B. Larimore that said every time he walked to the Bible to read it, he felt like a man walking to the ocean with a teaspoon to dip it dry. And that is certainly the inexhaustible nature of this book. I had never given proper attention before to this truth. I've talked about the sin in the garden and certainly quoted Adam's statement, but have you ever noticed how we went from in Genesis 2 at the very end of the chapter, Adam being pleased with the woman that God brought him? He's pleased at the end of Genesis chapter 2. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. And we go from that to, that woman you gave me. How did we get there? Satan, I can promise you. And if you and I start getting a different attitude in our marriage, a denigrating attitude toward our mate, I can promise you Satan's lurking. He's in the vicinity. And he may be closer than you think. And he's planting these minefields, and you and I need to be mindful of the danger that is found as you and I think about these matrimonial minefields. I would note that what I said last night is certainly borne out this morning by Genesis 3. Matrimonial minefields may appear in serene settings. Could you find a more peaceful setting than the Garden of Eden? No. And yet right there in the midst of a garden paradise, Satan's lurking to try to do his sinful work. And you think about this, just because you've been raised in a Christian home and you may be a preacher or a preacher's wife, an elder or elder's wife, or someone that's been in the Lord's church for decades, does that mean Satan's going to adopt a hands-off policy when it comes to your marriage? No, he's coming after you. If he gets a chance, He's coming. And you and I have to be there on guard, knowing that he's trying to plant these minds, and that we have to be careful with our steps, or else we could find ourselves in a situation where we go from this to the constant conflict and criticisms that we spoke of last night. And the more those criticisms build and build and build and build, it's inevitable there's finally going to be an explosion in our marriage that's going to erupt and cause great difficulty. These constant criticisms, this put down, this sarcasm that we sometimes get involved in. You know, I was reading some of these quotations to you last night from these couples, and it was feeling like, you know, I'm not sure I'm reading the right statements for this group, because I think a lot of folks in this group that cared enough to come here would certainly not say some things that were said by these couples last night. But then I must confess to you, I remembered that in my 25 plus years experience of preaching, getting closer to 30 now, I've had some couples in my office that were Christians, members of the church, and they have said some of the most hateful things I've ever heard in my life, one to another. And so it's not impossible that Christians could get so far gone in their letting their tongues run wild that they say anything that comes to mind without regard to whether it helps or hurts. That's why this book right here has been of particular interest to me as it relates to this, but of course I'm more interested in the book on the right, and if this has anything good in it, it's because it came from principles found in that book. We talked last night about this filtering at the end, these filters that are so difficult for us to navigate through when we're listening to someone. This makes it easy to come to false conclusions. There are 5 given in the book. Distractions such as noise, background noise. I can't hear you because I'm so distracted by all this noise. Cell phones, television going on. What'd you say, huh? I don't. Emotional, if you've had a bad day at work. Some beliefs and expectations. We tend to see in others' conversation what we expect to see, and if we've already drawn a conclusion about what they mean, we're going to sometimes be less than charitable. Differences in style and the way we've been raised, and then a self-protection, a fear that I'm going to be rejected, which causes me to not really show you who I am as your mate, because I'm afraid I might be rejected and I don't want to feel that insecurity. Someone wrote in this book, as a matter of fact, you'll find this statement, I like it. The best defense against allowing filters to damage your relationship is to acknowledge the filter when you're aware that it's there. And here's an example of this. Tom comes in and he says, this bill for the phone company got missed again. We better get this paid. She snaps with anger, thinking he's blaming her for it. And she says, well, I'm not the one who forgot it. Can't you see I have my hands full? Do something helpful. Well, now watch, this is where, if we're not careful, this kind of retort could cause someone to retort right back with something equally sarcastic or pointed, and then before you know it, we've got a free-for-all going on, verbally speaking. Tom's wise here. He says, I'm sorry, I should have seen you were busy. Rough day? She says, yes, I had a very frustrating day. I don't mean to snap at you, but I've had it up to here. If I'm touchy, it's not really anything you've done. Well, that's a breath of fresh air. Tom, maybe we can talk about it some after dinner. And Marta says, thanks. Now, what I want to point out to you here is that without even using the word filter, Tom and Marta have acknowledged that there's one there. What is the filter that Tom is filtering her words through? He's realizing, you know what, the only reason she's saying what she's saying, the way that she's saying it, is because, not because of anything she has against me per se. She's had a bad day and she needs someone to reach out and just hold her and let her know that it's going to be all right. This conversation didn't escalate into an argument. It could have very easily, but Tom had the good sense to see that it was not the right time to raise this particular issue, and he backed away from it. You and I cannot allow selfish pride to cause us to just plunge right in and say whatever comes to mind in response to something we view as hateful. Now look at these beliefs and expectations. We come from all these backgrounds, different backgrounds. It tells about a couple that had difficulty deciding what they wanted to do. And I think this is interesting, and there's not a couple in here that hasn't been probably in this very road right here. Alex wants to go bowling, but he's thinking maybe Helen is not interested in going out and doing anything, so he says very carefully, we have some free time tonight. I wonder if we should try to do something. Helen's thinking she would like to get out, but hearing the tentativeness in his voice and thinking he really doesn't want to go out, she is trying to be nice and says, well, I don't know. What do you think? Well, we could go bowling, but it could be league night and we might not get in anyway. Maybe we should just stay in and watch TV. Helen's thinking, aha, that's what he really wants to do, is stay in and watch TV. So thinking she's being nice, she says, that sounds good to me. Why don't we see what's on cable tonight? Maybe there'll be something good. He's disappointed. He's thinking, I knew it. She really doesn't want to make the effort to get out and do something. Yeah, okay. Now you see the filtering that's going on here? He's already decided in his mind what his wife will want, and he's gearing his words in that direction, but he's overplayed his hand, so to speak, because now she thinks he doesn't really want to go out, and one thing leads to another, and they don't get to go out and enjoy a night they otherwise would have and could have if they'd just been open, completely open and honest with one another. You'll notice there's no escalation. This isn't near sarcastic like some of the others we've been reading. It's not withdrawal. It's not making invalidating, put-down statements, but they're still not going to get to go out and have a good time this night because they didn't communicate. And I know as we get older, sometimes Tish and I joke, you know what, used to be that we viewed this as a boring night. I'm so glad we're just sitting here tonight. Sometimes you just want to do that, but there are other times, though, you can't assume that just because that's the way you have become that your wife feels the same way. She may want to go out and try to slam dunk a basketball. Different styles. We come from these different backgrounds. Todd and Sue, very different families. Now, in his family, they're very expressive, they're gregarious, they're outgoing, and they show a lot of emotion, and when they show emotion, they show great intensity. And that's just their way. It's their family tradition. She's from a more reserved family, so any slight raising of the voice to her translates into, you're really angry. And I must confess, I came from Todd's house. Not in the sense that we were saying things that were really hateful as much as we were just saying them with a lot of intensity and passion. And so when Tish and I got married, she came from the background of the more reserved. And so if I would get animated about something I was thinking about and something that I was upset about, she would think that I was really, really mad. And I was confused. I thought, I'm not mad. I'm just into what I'm thinking about. Let me give you the example here of their conversation. Todd comes in, well, what did it cost to get the muffler fixed? $480. What? How could they possibly charge that much? That's outrageous. Sue hears the intensity of the voice, and she says, I wish you'd stop yelling at me. I've told you over and over I can't listen to you when you're yelling. I'm not yelling at you. I just can't believe it costs that much. Why can't we have quiet conversation like other people? My sister and brother-in-law never yell. Well, they don't talk about anything either. Look, 400 and however many bucks. He said, that's a lot of money. I can't, that's just too much money. She said, well, why don't you take the car in next time? I'm tired of being yelled at for things like this. Honey, look, I'm not upset at you. I'm upset at them, and you know I can get pretty hot, but I'm not trying to say you did anything wrong. Now she starts calming down with that reassurance. Well, it seems that way sometimes. I'm not upset at you. Let me give that place a call. Where's the number? Now, how'd you like to be the guy on the other end of the line when he makes the call? I think he's about to unload, but I'm telling you, these are typical situations sometimes where we filter what we're hearing and think it means one thing when really it doesn't mean that. And that leads to a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. And then finally, there's this self-protection we were talking about where we're so afraid of being rejected, we don't come right out and say what we want to do. For example, wouldn't you like to go see that new movie with me is more tentatively stated than, I'd like to see that new movie, want to go? Well, why might we not put it that way? Well, if they say no, then that's going to be a problem. This is kind of like our conversation sometimes. Well, we've already decided we're going to go out to eat. Now what? You know the next question, right? Where are we going? Well, I don't care. Wherever you want to go, hon. Well, how about, no, I don't want to go there. Okay. How about, no. Well, where do you want to go? I really don't care where we go. Okay. This is easy for us to fall into the trap of doing. And, you know, we're sometimes afraid to say where we really want to go because we're afraid that might not please our mate. And so wanting to please your mate is a good thing, but sometimes it can stifle openness if you're not careful and willing to state what you want to do in a very forthright way. Now, I'm going to start just rattling off a number of these others. Believe me, when I started preparing for this, and I got plenty of notice, when I'd think of one, I'd write it down, and I'd be driving down the road and speak it into the phone recorder or something like this. And so there are probably more here than we'll have time to really deal with. Satan has planted numerous mines, and there are many minefields. Here's one: wearing your feelings on your sleeves is a matrimonial minefield. And the reason I have 1 Corinthians 13 on the board, or on the screen, is because of the fact that it says forthright, just point blank, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 4, love suffers long, it's kind, it doesn't envy, it's not vaunted, puffed up, it does not behave itself rudely, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil. Do we ever translate someone's statement into, do we put, as someone said, the worst possible construction on the statement that someone's just made to us? Maybe it's our mate. And we're so touchy that we can't even be approached about anything that we can improve upon because we feel like it's a wholesale condemnation and rejection of our entire person, when it's not that at all. It's trying to polish the stone. And we cannot wear our feelings on our sleeves in our marriages and allow every single word to cause us to bristle. Here's what happens when that happens. The other person, our mate, starts being so cautious and scared and walking on eggshells of how to say what they're going to say that there's no real openness or communication. It's not a joyful atmosphere. It's tense. You could cut the tension with a knife. And though we do want to be cautious about how we say what we say, we've got to talk about the other side of the coin too, and that is to suggest we cannot allow statements our mate makes to cause us to jump to conclusions. I mentioned last night, and I didn't really properly explain it, this speaker-listener technique that they talk about in the book, Fighting for Your Marriage. And the reason I said it's laborious and awkward is this. When we have a discussion, usually there are no ground rules to slow us down, but this slows the person down. There has this piece of linoleum, although I read about in the book, it's the authors of the book, one of them was having a discussion with their husband at a restaurant, and they weren't talking about it very well, and they were starting to say things that were sarcastic, and she grabbed the menu and said, "I don't mean to talk to you this way. I'm sorry, you have the floor." Now, when the other person has the floor, the only job the listener has is to really understand what they believe about what they're saying and to repeat it back to them so that you know whether that's what they're saying or not. You know, on this video I mentioned to you last night that this sister gave me at the congregation where I used to preach, it showed a couple that was having this discussion about football and whether football was going to be on the television every night. And as they were first talking about it without any ground rules, without any control rods to slow down the friction, they were getting a little more animated than they were later on when the structure was introduced. But you know what happened? they weren't really getting anywhere as far as understanding what the other one was saying. She wasn't expecting him to give up football altogether and not be interested in it. If you watch it, when she has the floor and he has to repeat back exactly what she's saying, I feel this. Well, what you're telling me is you feel such and such, yes. And if they're not saying that, they can then tell you, no, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, and then you clarify. This keeps you from getting into those situations we talked about last night, where you have a 45-minute argument and can't remember what it started with because you're talking about so many different issues. This helps to focus like a laser beam the issue and zoom in on it. Now, as you watch them talk about this discussion, you finally realize this. She's not bothered so much by the fact that he's watching football as the fact that she doesn't think she's getting enough attention from the man she loves. And she wants to be more involved in his life and wants him to be more involved in hers. Failing to meet those needs of our mate, that's a matrimonial minefield. Why is that a matrimonial minefield? Because if you don't meet their needs, tell me who will. True or false? It's a well-known fact that in the book His Needs, Her Needs, Willard Harley and many other authors like him have identified what the male's basic needs are and what the female's basic needs are, yes. And that information is available. We've been to marriage seminars where it's been mentioned. We've taught on it. We know what they are. But it's not enough to know. We've got to know and do. How many marriages have been wrecked because someone else stepped in to say, you're very beautiful? I don't hear that from my husband. How many marriages have been wrecked because there's no admiration given to the man from his woman, the one he loves? And you know, these are things that might seem small, but they can add up over time. And look, I can promise you this, ladies, if you're listening to me, there is no one in this room, in this world, that your husband would rather hear a positive statement from about him and something good about him than from you. And wives certainly deserve the same. They deserve that praise. I remember very vividly playing softball many years ago with a group of guys, and it was a Friday night game, and I was smaller then. I need to say truth in advertising. I could run around the base in 3 seconds. No, just kidding about that. But in all honesty, I was a little more athletic then than I am now. And I remember the bases were loaded, and I came up to the plate, and I happened to hit one in the gap for a double, to clear the bases to put us in the lead in the last inning, with the top of the last inning. And I looked in, my first line of sight was to my wife, who was sitting in the stands. And I just knew that when I looked in there to the stands, she would be like looking out at me adoringly as if, you are amazing. You are amazing. She had no idea I'd been up to bat. She was talking to some girl that was there with her, and they were having what seemed to be a very enjoyable conversation. But when the game was over and we packed our stuff up and got in the car to go home, I thought she would say something. Truth be told, she didn't know I'd been up to bat at any of the times that night. And so she didn't know it was that important to me. And I said, don't you want to know how the game turned out? Yeah, well, seemed like a good game. Yeah, right. I said, well, yeah, we won. That's good. You want to know how we won? I need to be your hero. Look, I know the female tendency is to say, I am so weary of the male ego. And I understand that it can get way out of bounds sometimes. The male ego can get way, way out of bounds. I know that. But do not misinterpret a man's need to be your hero as pure egotism. It's not. He needs to be loved and admired by the one he loves most in this world. And so if you think something good about your man, tell him. I was listening last night to some romantic type songs as I drove to the airport to pick up Tish. I got to get, after that sermon last night on the lighting the fire, I had to go to the airport. Anyway, I'm listening to this song that some of you will remember from days gone by. I forget the original artist, but it's I've told every little star just how great I think you are. Why haven't I told you? And there's really a sense of a truth in that you and I need to think about as husbands and wives. I brag on my wife all the time to other people. Do I tell her what I tell others? She may brag on me to others, but does she occasionally tell me? It's important to do a Philippians 2:3 and look not every man on his own things, but also on the things of others. Perpetual inconsideration, also a Philippians 2:3 text. Because if I'm looking only out for my own things, that may not seem like a big deal until it starts building and building and building. I'll give you an example. Last night, I'm sitting there at the baggage claim area. The carousel's there, and the flight has arrived, and the people are coming down to get their luggage. And there's this bruiser of a guy. I mean, he's bigger than I am. And he sits right next to me, takes the seat next to me where I was sitting. And I noticed this woman is up at the baggage claim, and at first I don't know whether she's by herself or with someone, and then I noticed this huge bag come down the carousel, and she fights with it and finally is able to lift it up high enough to get it over the railing and get it there, and then she turns back and looks at the guy that's sitting next to me rummaging through his bag for something. I think he was looking for his iPod. And she gives him a look as if to say, hello, do you see what I'm doing here? I am lifting a 50-pound bag over this railing while you sit there and do what are you doing? Well, then I thought surely when their eyes met and he saw the look, he'd get up and say, oh, I'm sorry, hon. No. She went back to the carousel and waited for the next bag, which was even larger than the one that came before. And I thought to myself, I was watching this, I thought, you know what? She took it pretty good-natured. They looked very young. These couples look younger and younger to me than they used to. Looked very, very young. And so I thought, you know what? He can get by with that maybe for now. Let me ask you a question. If that happens all the time, like a drip, 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 is it eventually going to wear on her to more than just a smile of frustration? You and I have to be asking ourselves, are we showing proper consideration for our mate in the littlest things? Is there something small I could do that would be a huge deal to my mate? And I'll be honest with you, I've had to give myself a little sermon here in the last few weeks as my wife has hurt her foot and has her left knee also needing surgery. Of course, I feel responsible because she stepped on the cord that tore her plantar fascia. It was my radio cord. So believe me, I'm paying for it by all the acts of kindness and service that I'm doing. But you know what? I'm losing weight too. I'm going places to get things for her. And you know what? I, in all seriousness, it's shown me that, hey, I could have been and should have been doing more of these things than I have been. I could have. And she doesn't have to injure her foot to need help. She still needs assistance. And this is the kind of thing that I ask myself, am I needing to improve in being more considerate of my mate when it comes to certain things? Now, withholding physical intimacy as punishment, matrimonial minefield. And you know what 1 Corinthians chapter 7 talks about. It's this very clear statement where the Bible says, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband, and the husbands to render to the wife due benevolence, and likewise the wife to the husband. The wife has not power over her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that you may get your husband to finally wake up. No. That's not what it says. That you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer and come together again. Why? Because Satan tempts you not for your incontinency. I promise you, one of his biggest matrimonial minefields is someone lurking out there to say, oh, you are sexually frustrated and you have no real affection being shown to you by your mate. Well, I can take care of that for you. And one thing leads to another, and pretty soon shattered hearts and fractured homes are the result. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that we can just treat our mates any way we want to and then say, as Mike was pointing out last night, okay, you still have responsibilities to me. You are certainly, I thought about this lighting the match thing. When we treat our mates like jerks, or we're jerks in the way that we treat our mates, that's like throwing water on a pack of matches and then trying to light it. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. We've got to be very clear. Now, we don't say, if you'll do what I want, then I'll give you what you want. That is certainly out of bounds. It's a matrimonial minefield. Becoming a workaholic, time thieves. There's so many time thieves. Work is one of them, and we're so busy. You can tell how old this picture is. Look how these phones. I'm not even sure those are phones, but that's how old it is. We can get like this, man, and we've got so many different things going on. Technology, matrimonial minefield, yes. What would you be willing to sacrifice for your mate? Ephesians 5:25, Christ sacrificed his very life. Can you sacrifice your laptop for a weekend getaway? Can you sacrifice your iPhone and iPad for 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes? So that your mate, and you know what? I was reading one of the books that I was reading in preparation for this series. One of the authors said he remembers the day that he found out he could get Wi-Fi in his home. He's a marriage therapist and expert in the field, and he said he was so excited he got Wi-Fi in his home, and now he didn't have to be cabled to something. He could work from anywhere in the house. And he thought, this will increase my quality time with the children. I'll be able to work out in the right where everyone is. He said, what I found out was I was so distracted by what I was doing, I wasn't there. And there are times I can tell when we'll be sitting in the living room, maybe watching something on television, and my phone will go off, and I'll feel like I just got to see who that is. And after a while, I can tell that Tish is like, are you fully into this with me or not? And I need to be more willing to just get away from it all. Well, that's sacrificing my Facebook time for my mate. Are you kidding me? Yes, I'm kidding, because no one should ever even think about that as a serious sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice at all. Not when it comes to the internet. Oh, you think about the television and all these things and what they can do to us. And they're thieves of our time. Matrimonial minefields are subtle. We can spend so much time watching television, we have no idea what our mate really knows or thinks about anything. No deep level conversation. It's all just about trivialities and things of that nature. And we're so tuned into the television, we can't seem to get our minds off of it. Look, have you ever lost a remote control in your house? Did you call 911 like we did? I mean, that's about the point it's gotten to, right? The remote is gone? What? How are we going to change the channels? Walk across the room and actually push a button to do it? No way. That's barbaric. Who would ever think of doing something like that? And so the television is on for hours and hours and hours and hours, and we know less and less and less. And years ago at the newlywed game that someone had the bright idea to play at our New Year's Eve party, I think Tish and I came in last. That was a wake-up call for me. I thought, we don't really have problems in our marriage per se, but I obviously don't know this woman like I want to. Even in the small things. What's her favorite flower? Pillsbury, right? Like you said last night. No. Do I know her favorite color? Do I know this, that, or the other? You know what? She's been willing to. My dad told my wife, Tish, he said, now, before you get married to my son, you must memorize the starting lineup for the Los Angeles Dodgers, including the first and third base coaches. She did. She actually memorized them. And she can now watch the television, the football game with us, and my son and I are amazed. She's over there color commentating now on how the game is going and making brilliant observations. But sometimes you can get so wrapped up in the television and those things that you just can't take your eyes off of it, even when you're missing out on one of the greatest things of your life. Now, let me ask you a question. Is there any danger? Is there anything good about the internet? You know what I'm absolutely amazed by? iPhones, iPads, internet. I could take my phone, download a GBN app, and watch GBN on my iPhone for free. I can watch it through a Roku device on my television. If I have high-speed internet, I can get online and watch it or listen to it house to house, heart to heart, material found online, sent out all over. Good things about the internet, bad things. Certainly, pornography is a minefield. And why do I say minefield? It's an obvious thing. You say it's not, but you know what? The internet is sneaky, right? You type in what you think to be a very innocent search term. One elder told me years ago with a red face that he had been planning to go to Twin Peaks and type that into the internet search engine, and I don't even want to tell you what happened next. You think about this kind of lurking, and true or false, there are pornographers out there that will take search terms that children might use to write papers in school and put those in their string of searches so that their suggested sites might pop up. It's lurking. Job 31:1, I've made a covenant with mine eyes. Why would I look upon a young woman? I've already vowed that I wouldn't. Psalm 101:3, I'll set no wicked thing before mine eyes, and I'm not going to look on a woman to lust after her. But it's not just men who struggle with internet pornography. I know of a marriage that broke up in a congregation where I preached because the wife would get up and she felt so disconnected from her husband's conversation that she was having an amazing conversation through the chat rooms. Now, I know of people who've met online, and that's a tremendous thing when you use the tool in all the right ways. It's a gift from God to have that technology available to you. But I also know that if you're married, you don't need to be in a chat room flirting with another person. That's wrong to be talking about those things, and it's a thief of our family time. Now, recreation is the same. You think about all the different things that we can be addicted to, and those can rob us of time if we're not careful. They're good in their rightful place, but we can get too far gone with some of these things. And look, you can even shop till you drop and think that and that's okay every now and then, just like it's okay for the guy to hit the links every now and then. But it doesn't need to be something that absolutely dominates our time. Now finally, as we come to a close, when spenders marry savers, matrimonial minefield. Where'd our money go? Well, I needed some things. Like what? New truck or what? I needed some things. Look, Psalm 37:21, the wicked borrow, but they don't pay back. Proverbs 22:7, the lender, the borrower, I should say, is servant to the lender. These principles have wrecked many a marriage. Many a marriage has been destroyed by financial minefields. Raising children can get in the mix here. You show favoritism to the children or a lack of unity when it comes to discipline. And Mike talked last night about the empty nest. You think about this. The children are growing up and we're involved in their activities, which is understandable and really expected. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be involved in their lives. But what happens when the empty nest takes place? If I have not maintained a good relationship, a close connected relationship to my wife, then the empty nest is going to seem awfully empty. True or false? Some husbands and wives get so wrapped up in their children, they forget to stay connected to one another. The children move out, and they're like, who are you? I know who you are, but who are you? And then lying. Oh, if you'll lie to me about the smallest of things, what would you do about the big things? Can I really trust what you tell me? Colossians 3:9, lie not one to another. Read about a man that was a businessman going to Boston. He said to his wife, he said, honey, I forgot some things in my office, on my desk there at the home office, and I really need them FedExed to me in Boston. Let me give you the address. I have a presentation that I have to give in the morning, and I need this FedEx to me. Please FedEx that to me. And so he was assured that she would do this. She got busy taxiing the children here and fro and to and fro and here and yonder. And he called that night. He says, you did remember to send the package, right? She hadn't. But she knew if she said, no, I didn't, he was going to let her have it. Oh, yeah, I sent it. Yeah, sure, I got it. No problem. She fully planned to go out and throw it away so that he would never know. When his stuff didn't come, the presentation couldn't be given. He caught an earlier flight home than she anticipated. Rather than bother her during the time the children might be busy or sleeping or whatnot, he decided to go ahead and get other transportation home. He was walking up the driveway. There's the car in the driveway, the stuff in the back seat. Not mailed. Tell me, the next time he tells her something, the next time she tells him something, I should say in this case, what's inevitably going to be the thought racing through his mind? Are you telling me the truth this time? Look, one little lie that you tell your mate about whether you did do something or didn't do something, you might think it no big deal. If it erodes the trust God wants you to have, it's a huge deal. And lying, God doesn't have a color-coded system. Lie not one to another. Insincere apologies. I'll close here. I have to. One lady I read said, I will want to talk to my husband about something that he's done that bothers me. And he will say, I'm sorry, almost immediately. And she said, I'm starting to figure out why he's doing that. He doesn't want to hear why it really bothered me. He just wants to say, I'm sorry, and be done with it. It's kind of a form of withdrawal, getting away from it all. But if I say I'm sorry, will you hush? An insincere apology is no real apology at all. And then blaming your mate for your grief. Betsy and Clarke had been married 12 years when they experienced the death of their 9-year-old son. He was killed instantly by an automobile as he rode his bicycle from the driveway into the street. The counselor writing this, Gary Chapman, said, in my first conversation with Betsy less than 6 hours after the accident, I discovered the seeds of blame. She said, I had just told Clarke last week he needs to spend more time with Andrew, talking with him about safety rules for riding his bicycle. If Clarke had talked with him, maybe this would not have happened. Later, talking to Clarke, I've never liked this place. I told Betsy 2 years ago I wanted us to get a little farm. I didn't like raising kids in the city. It's too dangerous. I wish I'd listened to my heart. 2 months later, that's not just an isolated thing. 2 months later, Clarke's saying the same thing. I just wish we would have moved to the farm 2 years ago. Betsy resisted the idea. She said it was so much more convenient in the city, but there's more to life than convenience. And the following week, Betsy says, if only Clarke had talked to Andrew about safety rules, maybe Andrew would still be with us. Betsy's blaming Clarke, Clarke's blaming Betsy, and they wouldn't say it to one another directly. Less than a year later, they were separated. Shortly thereafter, they divorced, creating additional pain for their 2 sons that were still alive, 5 and 7. Charles and Kelly had a similar experience, but they never blamed one another. Their daughter died in the pool. She was a good swimmer, Kelly said, and she had never gone into the pool without our being there, but this was one of our rules. I don't know what happened, but they never blamed one another. She was just a child, and Kelly and Charles stayed together. And you and I must do the same. We cannot allow grief to rip us apart and to start the blame game. I'm so grateful that God gave us a book to tell us how to diffuse these matrimonial minds And I hope that all of us will do that. Thank you.
I keep falling in love with him over and over and